Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly AgWeather update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. I want to start you off with your weekend rains. This is a map kind of zoomed in on North Carolina, looking at some of the heavy rain that we did see in parts of the southeastern side of the state. Plus, we did get some heavier rain in through here and right here in north central part of North Carolina. Some pockets here of 4 to 5 inches of rain, some locally heavy rains. But you can see the scattered nature of these storms that came through. There were other pockets that were missed. So we're going to try to wrap this into the kind of the larger context of the moisture situation going late into this summer, and then discuss, I think, one of the big features in this pattern that has been absent from North Carolina, and we need to keep it that way going forward. So I'm going to come back to that in a few seconds. But I look back over the last 90 days, and I was just trying to assess where there are still significant longer-term departures from normal. And just generally speaking, across the state, some of our largest deficits are in that 4 to 5 inch range. Okay, you can see a couple of pockets here that over the last 90 days are missing out on 4 to 5 inches of rain. Whereas over toward the Appalachian Mountains and then in pockets throughout the rest of North Carolina, there are a few places that are considerably above normal in terms of precip. But you can find these same areas that have been showing up dry on the latest drought monitor. And this is what we've got here across the country. So let's take a moment and just look around the rest of the country. Heavy rains moved through here over the weekend, and they're continuing to push into parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley. But remember, heavy rains on such drought-stricken ground is going to be more of a problem at this point than it is going to be a solution. It's good to see rain, but it's not going to be overall corrective, and it's going to cause some near-term problems. Take note of the drought issue still in the western Corn Belt and in pockets in the central Corn Belt as well, and the long-term continuing drought across the western United States. But coming in here to North Carolina, we'll zoom in on the southeast first. Let's come right on into North Carolina. You can see that these areas that are drier do match up well with those areas that have really missed out, of course, on that recent precip. So, of course, these are one and the same. So we need to watch this drought situation evolve, if it does evolve, because we do have better precipitation on the way again. And lately, the rains that came through, which we started here today, did hit some of those driest pockets. So that's really important to see. So our latest soil moisture map kind of reveals the national issues we're dealing with. Kansas, parts of Nebraska really missed out on some of the recent rains, as has this section of North Dakota. So, you know, this part of the plains in the western Corn Belt here still shown up quite dry. And there's been some soil moisture improvements in parts of Iowa and Illinois, but there is a large quadrant of Indiana that's still really struggling. So I just want to point that out to you corn and soybean growers here. But as of late, the newest 16-inch soil moisture map shows huge improvements. But remember, this came via some extremely heavy rainfall, and I'm going to show it to you. Same map, just blown out for the whole country. So you can see that from New Mexico getting into the lower Mississippi River Valley, large area through here, picking up 6 to 10 inches of rain, including some flooding you've probably seen on the news today in Dallas. But there was an upper level low that was sitting here that kind of moved across the Corn Belt. So a lot of the eastern Corn Belt got some much needed rain and some cooler conditions, all right? But just take a look at the drier swath here on the backside. I want to point that out because this is quite critical for this area and its success going forward in this forecast. Because our next 10 days tend to be drier in this area. So if you take a look here, most of North Carolina is going to see near average rainfall. I'm going to talk to you about what's coming out over here in just a few seconds, but we do have more showers and storms at the beginning of this week, but the heaviest rain's farther to the south. And there are some fronts that are going to try to work their way through here this week, and then a low I'm going to be watching at the end of the week could light up some severe weather in the midwestern part of the United States. But as we work our way into the month of September, it's going to be about managing that water across the country as we want crops to start to dry down, to finish their fill, but then dry down so we can get a successful harvest in here. And that's what's going to bring us into an important discussion about the tropical season. So we know this is nothing new, no new information here, but this year we've had 3 named systems, and our current accumulated cyclone energy is at 2.8. Normal for this time of year is almost 10 times that. So we're at about 10% of normal accumulated cyclone energy. But the National Hurricane Center is watching a new African easterly wave that is moving into more favorable conditions. In other words, the sheer amount of dust plus the wind shear, okay, which is the change in wind speed direction with height, is actually going to give this, I think, a better chance at making it. Now, what is important is to understand if it does make it, where does it go? And we have some preliminary ideas on that. From this morning's European model run, All these different squiggly lines you see here are different low pressure tracks by the forecast model, and they're actually broken up into depth of pressure. But we really just want to get an idea on where the steering current is going to be for this system should it develop. And a lot of that's going to hinge on the placement of the subtropical ridge, which has been kind of moving back and forth in this area. And that is the feature I really want to talk about. I said, what have we not seen this year? We've not seen the subtropical ridge sitting over North Carolina, or even as far in the interior, like into parts of central Tennessee. It's been out here over the open ocean. And why I want to discuss that is, just take a look at it. See how well, that's where the high is right now. But you can see there's this whole area of higher pressure. So the flow, these are those African easterly waves I'm telling you about, is kind of coming and making the turn like this. And we've seen fronts like we have right now pushing up against, and that's what's led to the enhanced convergence and better rain as of late. But it's this high that I'm watching most carefully, because if it stays in place here, this does give us that trajectory in the tropical system like this. And we know that that can push at times into the Carolinas, should it develop, or it could keep it right out to open ocean. That is still very much up in the air, as is the development of this system. I mean, it may fizzle out. It may encounter too much shear or too dry of air. All of that is a possibility. But here we are just, 3 weeks out from the peak of the hurricane season, and we need to be watching the tropics very carefully. Now, what's aiding this is we still see quite a bit of warm water here. So the temperatures are above normal, which means that any would-be tropical system will have plenty of energy to extract from the ocean surface through evaporation to really fill it full of water and empower it. We also have our La Nina, and if this La Nina continues, it will at some point reduce the wind shear here. That's a very normal characteristic. The last thing to think about is the warmer water that is in both the North Pacific and North Atlantic. And the effect of this warmer water here is more about keeping the main jet stream branch pretty far to the north as we go forward. So what you'll see here is in a few moments that for the country going into September, we often start to think about risk of early season frosts in the north. That will not be a discussion this year. Now this La Nina has as of late gotten stronger and stronger. And you can see right now that the trade winds, I mean, look at this. I love showing these graphics. These trade winds are just really cooking in here, and they're meeting a westerly wind burst out of India. And this is La Nina to the T, exactly what it's supposed to look like, which tells us this La Nina is strong. It will likely last into fall and early winter. And we do have some questions about whether or not it'll last past the beginning of the new year. It could start to fade. But that will be our third winter of La Nina should this continue to maintain its strength. And it's really showing signs of continuing that. If you look at the ocean temperatures in what we call Niño region 3.4, so that's a box about right here, Niño region 3.4, we can see that while the ocean temperatures warmed in June and July, they have since dropped, and now we're back down to a full degree Celsius below normal. So just for reference, that would put this at a moderately strong La Nina. And this has now put most of the global forecasting agencies kind of on alert for the La Nina persisting through fall and winter. Now thinking about that, if we just use this one metric, the ocean temperatures here, which we're considering to be the more dominant driver, this is what we know historically. This is a graphic showing you September to October correlation with precipitation with the ocean temperatures in Niño region 3.4. Now, when you look at this, what you have to remember is the cooler colors, the negative correlation would be the wetter colors, and these would be the drier. So what's interesting about this is that for most of the country, there's either a very weak correlation or a drier bias for the beginning of fall. But again, what this cannot account for is any would-be tropical system. And that's why you see along the Gulf Coast, these colors are more in this range, showing us very weak correlations. But we tend to be drier in the interior, drier in the plains. This tends to be a pretty typical pattern when there is a La Nina. So let's do the same thing, but let's flip this from precipitation over to temperature. Now remember, when you look at this, these would represent cooler conditions, and this would represent warmer. And so the color bar makes more sense here. What is interesting about this pattern is that, as you go forward, There could be a discussion once we get into October of some cooler fall weather making it through the Midwest. But I mean, these correlations are so weak, it's hard to really use. So what I'm trying to say is the strongest correlations with a La Nina or an El Nino, they always show up in winter, but we can use them as an idea right now. So what I want to do with that information is show you why the latest outlook for the month of September from the European model is overall drier for a huge part of the United States, including North Carolina. But we're just going to have to put question marks on all of this, because I need you to remember that this model is just not designed to forecast tropical systems out this far. So this is the European weeklies. It's part of their subseasonal forecasting model. It is not like the European model I typically show you, and I'm going to show you in a minute. It cannot forecast tropical systems, but you can see that it is increasing precipitation amounts in the Gulf. And that means that we could be seeing a pretty active second half of this hurricane season, understanding we're still 3 weeks away from its peak. All right. This same forecast has been echoed by the CPC. They updated this last week, and you now see that throughout much of the northern tier of the United States, our Corn Belt, upper Midwest, this area, back into the plains, drier. But you start to see how they're seeing the wetter than average conditions here. This is a good forecast. I think we're going to see more of that moisture from the tropics getting here. And again, it's the big reason why. This subtropical ridge has been behaving. It's stayed over Bermuda. It's expanded out in the Atlantic, and it's not set up here. And that's been the one major thing that has been absent. Now, just to show you something, this is the current outlook for September, October, and November. So this would be fall. And you can see they're favoring above average temperatures, slightly above average, and drier to the farther west you go. So that's kind of what we got. And just for the fun of it, I'll go ahead and show you what the current thinking is from this model for December, January, February. Precipitation right now, they have got this honed in on another active La Nina winter. So that's when we're typically dry south of this line. A lot of storm systems come in. Well, let's draw that again. Dry south of this line, a lot of storm systems come into the northwest like this. They dive into the plains and then eject in the Ohio River Valley. And that tends to mean we have a lot of fronts that come through us, including those backdoor cold fronts that bring in that cold air damming. So if La Nina has its just tight death grip on this pattern for most of winter, it tends to be one where we end up dealing with quite a bit of precipitation, but also some ice as you push up against the Appalachian Mountains there. So I just wanted to bring that up. We're going to watch this evolve. And remember, it is August 22nd, so looking out this far, it's speculative at best. But I can show you other folks doing it as well. This is the September, October, November forecast globally from the IRI multi-model probability forecast engine. That is from the CPC and Columbia University. And you once again see that they've got a pretty similar forecast, drier through much of the interior of the United States, getting over toward the Carolinas. Important to note, South America, we're going to talk about this at the very end. There is a chance that they have a pretty fast start to their planting season. I'm going to give you more information about that in a second. And if there's drought issues, they're going to be in far southern Brazil and into Argentina. And in Australia, as they work their way towards spring, it looks as though a very high probability of a wet spring this year, given the La Nina sticking around. All right. So just because we can, let's go out there and look at December, January, February. And if we do that, and let's zoom in on North America. You'll see a pretty similar forecast. See how it's wetter in here and wetter in there, but they're drier across the southern tier of the United States. So that's very typical of what to expect when that occurs. And as I stated, we will talk about South America, but you can see where the drought pressures are going to be along the Paraná River. That's a very productive area in Argentina. So we need to keep an eye on that as well for their upcoming growing season. Big wild card is going to be the rest of Brazil. Cover that again in a second. So let's come back to the near term here. Over the next 7 days, we possibly could see 1.5 inches of rain through parts the eastern half of North Carolina. It seems to be a little drier the farther north you go, but the heaviest rains are still yet to fall down here in the lower Mississippi River Valley. To show it to you in the high-res models, I want you to see that the first round of storms has cleared us this morning. But what we're going to be watching for is tonight another round. See it here? This is kind of just a spoke of a wheel that's coming around a broader upper level low that sits here. So tonight we could see some stronger storms producing some locally heavy rain moving across the state. But then as that upper level low exits the northeast, we do go into Tuesday and then into Wednesday with only chances of scattered storms overall. And so what I want to do is I want to take it from here and show you the new European model to kind of get a sense of when the rain chances come back up again. So this is Monday into Tuesday. We've already seen this. And so we get a little bit of a break midweek. But then you're going to notice by Thursday, see this? Getting into Thursday night and Friday, our chances at the end of the week start to increase with rainfall again. All right. And then as we go into the weekend, that could be the wetter time period this week, given the latest update from the European model. So what's happening here is that we've got lows curling around the Hudson Bay, and they're just leaving these big long fronts out like this. We still have the lingering frontal boundary here, and it's just being fed on moisture coming around that subtropical high. So even though the middle of this week gets a little bit of a break, as we get toward the end of the week and the weekend, it starts to pick back up again. So a lot of scattered precipitation, and even going out there into week 2, we see more of it. Now, I'm going to show you this, and I'm going to tell you don't trust it just because it's so far out there. But that right there is the tropical system that I mentioned a few moments ago. So you can see it starting to come into view next Monday, Tuesday, and the models don't know what to do with it. This is a single operational run, but I'm just going to tell you, if this high pressure builds in, this is way out there, Wednesday the 31st, and that low sits here and it brings a front, that front will protect North Carolina. That front will push out here, take this low, and just shove it out to open ocean. No chance it'll make it. If all of this is wrong, and that high pressure center is farther to the east, it's way over here, remember the flow around a high comes around like that, and that would steer the system in. So we need this to verify, okay? But I'm telling you, this is a single model run. It's way out there in the distance, so let's not put too much stock into it. Just want to be clear on that. All right, what are we seeing in terms of this upper level pattern I want you to be aware of? Well, there's our upper level low leaving this week into New England. And then as we get into this next weekend, take a look. We see the pattern by Sunday doing this. That is the position of that subtropical high. So if it's there, it's going to pull moisture in this direction. And that's why the beginning of next week, we're going to watch for a low that starts here and then moves in this direction, bringing fronts through us. And because of that, the week 2 precipitation forecast shows where that moisture is coming up, and it's going to push over to our area. So we don't see any sense of below normal precipitation for the next, we'll call it 15 days. So we'll get to the end of August and the beginning of September with near normal to wetter than normal conditions. Now to move over toward a talk about temperatures, I'm hearing a lot of folks in the Midwest, which we've already taken a look at the drought situation there, but a lot of folks talking about an issue with their corn crop called tipback. And I think, of course, all you corn growers know what this is, but any issue during pollination or early grain fill tends to hit the top of the ear hardest. And some of these overnight low temperatures have been very, very warm throughout a big section of the country here since the beginning of July. And that's what you're looking at, the rank since the beginning of July. So I see this and I'm saying, where are these temperatures going? Because today's a cooler day for us in North Carolina. We see the heat in the west and across the northern tier of the United States. As we play into Tuesday and Wednesday, we don't really break over to be above average in temperatures through the middle of this week. By the time we get into Thursday and Friday, the story stays the same. A lot of days here in the mid 80s overall with the high temperatures, and that's going to last, through our weekend. So when did the temperature patterns start to break? Well, if we just play out this 5-day sliding window, here we are at the end of August and the start of September. We could see, more normal temperatures, maybe a little bit above normal as that pattern kind of resets. But the big ridge being in the western United States in the model is just not a signal for us to go hot. There's no big subtropical high that's just sitting over us, which would be the most kind of feared late summer weather pattern for us to really start to rapidly build drought. You can see that much of the above average temperatures are farther here in the western United States. So given that we've got this update now about what we're dealing with, I want to come back to a couple of those points I touched on for international weather. First thing I want to do is talk about South America. Now, over the next 10 days, most locations are drier than normal. But remember, we don't even really talk about rain here until we get past mid-September and October. If you look at it another way, this is the next 10 days of total precipitation. So more scattered storms hitting Uruguay over toward the Paraná River and in southern Brazil. But a lot of this is scattered rainfall. Locally heavier amounts are going to be quite limited when you look at this overall. You see the concern, the bigger picture concern here is that the longer range models want to keep this area quite wet going into planting. And I'll talk about that in a second. But I'd like to point out that Argentina from Buenos Aires over towards, so here's where the Parana River runs. So Cordoba's about here, Santa Fe's near the river. This area over the last few months has been very, very dry. So that's going to be problematic. But here's maybe the bigger story. When you look at the rest of South America from now through October 3rd, if these rains verify, Brazil will plant very, very fast, while Uruguay and Argentina have drought issues. And that could be very important for corn, soybeans, all sorts of crops, wheat. It could really hit a lot of the big ones in a big way. Now, what I'm concerned about is the monsoon comes on fast and then backs off in October and early November, and that would be disastrous for a South American crop. There are a couple of analog years that suggest that could occur, so I want to watch that very carefully. And I want to give you two other places to look at. First is India, the Indian monsoon. So what I'd like to show you here is that so far this year, the monsoon has been very wet south and west of that line. It's hit cotton production in through here. It's hit a lot of the big crops grown through the central part of the country, but it's been driest in the Ganges River Valley. And by the way, inside of that little circle I just made there, there's probably 500 million people that live there. So that's kind of an important area for India. And then lastly, I would like to just show you, let's go back to the USDA, this particular site, and I want to come over to China, and I want to show you some of the issues we've been hearing lately about what's been going on in China. I don't know, let's take this out to a 2-month drought indicator map, which is what you see here. Notice that much of southern China has been very dry. Part of the Manchurian Plain and North China Plain have been dry, but tucked in the middle has been very wet. All right. Big agriculture, the whole of China outside of the urban areas is very agricultural. Do a lot of cotton production back here where there's been some drought that's been developing. So I've been hearing just a lot of news about China. I wanted to give you the latest data here so you can kind of see what their drought situation looks like as we kind of move here toward the end of a growing season. So I appreciate your extra attention today. We will talk again next Monday. Thank you.